Good morning, everybody. A warm welcome once again to the Nürburgring Nordschleife for day 2 of the ADAC 24h Nürburgring Qualifiers. We had a fascinating race yesterday of the social media fallout from 4 hours in horrendous conditions. We were spot on in that the skill level required to make the finish, let alone win the race, was off the charts. The rain is still anticipated to have a say throughout the course of the day. It's also a blustery morning. We've already had 90 minutes of standard qualifying for the grid set for later on today. However, bear in mind that top qualifying is an addition to the weekend. Normally, we would see top qualifying exclusively reserved for the Nürburgring 24 hours, and there is a little tweak to how that will operate next month. But really good fun, considering this is a qualifier weekend for the big race next time out. Why not have a top qualifying session for just over an hour for the SP9/GT3 cars? So even though they were part of the session earlier on today, if you were fast enough, you now progress into a top qualifying session. So very much looking forward to how that will pan out. I'm Johnny Palmer, still, as I was yesterday, and I'm delighted to say that I'm still joined by Peter Snowden, who has raced the 24 hours in the past and has experience not only of this European circuit, but many others too. You're still racing?
Yes. Yes, life of the old dog, yes.
It's absolutely right. I mean, I don't know how much we can do. Have you done actually some races this year? Or I know you were doing some pre-season testing.
I haven't. I've done some pre-season testing, as you say, in an Aston GT4 that was in GT Cup. That was planned to happen. The deal didn't quite go through at the end, but that's how life is. So hopefully at some point this year, I'm officially, I think the official phrase is reserve driver, which, given my my aged elderly status, it's quite an honour. The most difficult part of driving the car is actually getting into it these days, because you have success ballast you didn't used to have when you were 25, let's put it that way. You know what I mean? Bigger overalls. Everything goes up in cost and size.
Yeah.
Yeah, but a bit of historic stuff coming up this year. A few things that'll be nice at the wheel of an Aston somewhere, somehow. In fact, I've only driven Astons on track this year, which is quite nice, actually.
That's surely, if you were to design a season, that's how you would want it.
Not too bad, is it? Not too bad at all. Can't complain. So the Nürburgring stuff today, as you said, complete standalone thing again. It's effectively 2 NLS rounds, NLS 4 and 5.
Yes.
With this top qualifier in between.
But they're not called NLS, but they actually, bizarrely, for the first time, I think, or certainly for the first time in a long while, they are part of the championship.
Correct. That came in. That was instigated last year. It became the point started to count. And you're absolutely right. One of the little anomalies there you've highlighted quite correctly is that we've had NLS 1, NLS 2, NLS 3, 3 different weekends. This weekend it's called Top N24 Top Qualifiers, is the official title of the weekend, which incorporates an NLS race yesterday.
Yes.
4 hour standalone, and another 4 hour race today, which in theory should be NLS 4 yesterday, NLS 5 today. They're not called that. However, the next round is called NLS 6.
Yes.
So we actually go 1, 2, 3, 6 with qualifiers in between.
With an NLS L.
Is that clear?
Round. Don't forget NLS L.
Yes, light in July.
Which stands for light, 7th of July.
But
that's
no
also
points for that.
That's also a 4-hour race.
Yep.
No points on it, as you correctly say, because there are no SP9 GT3 cars,
and there are GT4.
And there are no SP10 cars.
No.
So it's a chance for all the other classes to shine, and you would have thought the fastest car within that race is going to be a Cup 2 Porsche if they're allowed to be in.
Yeah, and I'd have thought there that just looking at it in a different way, that's actually a great opportunity for people to do the ring permit in that one without the other cars. And whether that would count or not, I don't know, because that's the whole point. You have to, we have to have some, a lot of people out there yesterday and today. Ironically, the guy I completely forgot to mention yesterday, Tom Canning, is doing his ring and permit. Now he's an Aston.
Just tell me why that's ironic.
Because he's the guy that I was going to be showing with the GT4 Aston. Extraordinarily, he was talking about. I was telling him only earlier this year. This is how these things work. You know, wheels within wheels in this industry. I was saying you've got to get yourself into the Nürburgring, and he was just like, why? This is a guy who's 23, raced British GT at 16. Dungeonetta's won that, etc. Now works Valkyrie test driver. Just pause ponder on that for a minute. Valkyrie test driver, yeah. drives GT4 cars, currently leading the GT Cup Championship this year, 2 meetings in, but they have 3 races each, a bit like touring cars in the UK. There's multiple rounds, multiple races at each round. But even though he's testing a development driver for Aston Martin officially, being the Valkyrie, he has to come and do his ring permit like anybody else. What your requirement to do is to get a ring permit B, the first one. You can't drive GT cars until you get a ring permit A, is 14 laps in 2 races. So ideally, he did literally 7 laps yesterday in a 330i, that's the number 502 car. And he's out again today, so he's had experience yesterday in the wet. He did message me last night saying he only had 1 lap on the slicks. And I said, well, it's 25 kilometres, don't worry about it, it's a long lap. It's not like it's a lap around Mallory somewhere short, is it, a mile and a half? But yeah, he's got to come and do that. So I'd have thought that's probably a great chance to do that. The only thing is, that NLS light race, will the organised ADAC count it as well? Because you haven't got the GT3 cars out, which is the very point of doing hours in other races, is to deal with other traffic. So it may not count. I guess with it being a non-championship event, it may not count as well. I'll look into that. We've got 4 hours later to delve into that.
Okay. Well, it would make sense if it wasn't part of the ring permit. Now, if you weren't around yesterday, perhaps watching a football match instead, as I was trying to keep an eye on at the same time, a phenomenal race out front. With Kevin Estre plugged into Grello, but Frank Stüppler went round the outside of Julian Andlauer and Antonius Bucher at the end of maybe the first lap, possibly the second lap. But the next time around, Andlauer got in front of them all, but then misjudged his braking point in the ever-changing conditions, piling into the red and white tyre barrier at Tiergarten and doing all manner of damage to the front of that car. Amazing, they stripped it all down, including taking the splitter off, and replaced it, although it didn't last much longer in the race. Andlauer only completing a total of 7 laps. That would leave Laurens Vanthoor out front, and one of Lawrence's tweets or posts late last night is, for anyone doubting, that was one of the toughest couple of stints that he's ever had to do in his life. The Nürburgring plus water is horrendous, having to judge the conditions really each and every time you go around every corner. So senses like a cat, and everybody else having to deal with, if you're sitting behind them, the spray that is involved as well. Side-to-side touring car racing within a couple of the TCR divisions. I mean, you think it's tough in an SP9 GT3 car. Well, those in Cup 2 for the Porsche Carrera Cup cars, or Cup 3 in the Caymans. And then, if you're scrabbling around for front-wheel drive grip in a TCR car, it's also incredibly tough if you catch the wrong bit of standing water at the wrong time. And for several bits of the race, we had a number of Code 60s out, slowing the pace. 44 Nico Menzel had some unconventional lines, it might be said, for the first couple of laps, but then he really did settle things down and had a good result in the end within the top 6. The other great thing about the 4-hour race yesterday was that it plunged us into darkness towards the end. Sunset officially at 9:25. We were easily around to 9:35 by the point that Patrick Niederhauser and his teammate Laurens Vanthoor crossed the line in the number 16 Sport PHX Porsche to make it 4 wins on the spin in the 911 GT3R, but not for that team. We've had so many different teams take victory. Falcon, Grello with Manthey EMA and Sport PHX. The Porsche, in its current iteration, appears to be quick no matter who is running it, and that is a daunting prospect for all the other teams that are looking to do well in next month's centrepiece race, Peter Snowden.
Yeah, absolutely. And an additional layer to that, of course, is different conditions for the first time. The first 3 races were, bright sunshine. This one was wet, soaking wet, and into the dark. So that Porsche clearly operating in its sweet spot at the moment, as you say, no matter which of the top-level teams run it. Which brings us probably quite neatly to qualifying, I guess, this morning.
Yes. Well, yes, as far as the front runners were concerned, in a sense, the slate is going to be wiped clean. But I think it's interesting from an academic point of view, because we all know who's likely to be quick, perhaps, in top qualifying. So maybe not a surprise to again see Kevin Estre and Patrick Pilet's car at the sharp end. 9 minutes 11.7 was the time set by Kevin Estre, and that was slower than yesterday's time by about a minute. Now, the format here is that the cars, in the order that they qualified, are now being sent away. This session began strictly speaking, a couple of minutes ago. So the 911 car is already off and on its way.
No, I don't think it is. I'm not sure it is. I think it had a slight issue.
Okay, interesting.
Come back to that. We've certainly got 16 Shearer Falcon. So yeah, it's 60. So it's Shearer Falcon due to Apt Lamborghini, Get Speed, etc., etc. As you said in that order, we're on number 14 now. That's the Get Speed Audi I've just mentioned. That's away. We should have the number. No, that's out of sequence. We've got a number 8 in there. That's slightly out of order. We've just had the number 14 Get Speed Mercedes go, which should have been preceded a few cars ago by the Utah Racing. So I'm not quite sure that Get Speed, well, the Get Speed got in there. Because we should have, you just say Manthey, Shearer, Falcon, the N Utah and Lamborghini. That's going now. So the list I've got from Race Control here with a printed list of the start number and the order isn't quite what's being reflected on the track.
You're looking at a list that was pinged to us on our little chat, aren't you? No, but I think if you look at the provisional result, as it's called, for the qualifying race 2, which is the yellow bit of paper in front of you, that is the correct order. Gabriele Piana, 9th fastest this morning in the Black Falcon Team EAE Porsche. So away will go, yes, Piana, who's been selected as the start driver there. But, I mean, you're spot on in terms of cars that have already been released into the session. Amongst them is not the 911 Grello Porsche.
Yeah, I thought not.
So 16 is there, Patrick Niederhauser. So is the 911 either late on parade, or did it not, for some reason, finish that session?
It hadn't made it to the pit in time, apparently. That's repaired a tyre carrier.
Tyre carrier failed without contact. Okay.
Not quite sure how to interpret that entirely. However, getting Grello 911, the car that should have been with Kevin Estre on board at the front of this, heading this field for this it's session 1, sort of shootout, session 1 lap, if you like, flying lap. The main car we were looking to do at the start of it isn't there. Didn't get to the pit lane in time, therefore can't do it. So in some ways it's slightly academic, because this has no bearing on the race this afternoon, just for absolute clarity. And what this really is now in front of us, Johnny, is, as we said yesterday, qualifiers, not qualifying. This is almost a practice run for the N24.
Yes. I mean, when you say
everybody, systems, teams, organisers, marshals, everybody, to say, when we do it to the rules in 3 weeks' time, this is how we're going to do it. So in some ways there's quite a bit of risk and jeopardy, because there's a damp track. You're taking these expensive GT3 cars around there, why do the teams feel it's worth risking it? Well, they obviously do. Maybe they're required to, I don't know. But this has no relevance on this afternoon's race.
I'm not sure that's right, though. Because this decides the order for the SP9s on the grid for later.
Sorry, that side, yes.
Yeah, so Grello are going to have to start at the back.
Yes.
Of the grid. So, I mean, can you win a race from how many SP9s have we got?
80? In 4 hours, yes.
Okay. But, I mean, the one thing that we benefit from within this, Kevin Estre's not going to agree, but Kevin Estre having to overtake 17 cars on the first lap is what we will then witness at 1 o'clock this afternoon. So that's going to be good.
And also the 34 Aston, not because it's an Aston, but because of you should just see it going out there now. That's the last car out. Yesterday that car was on the front row of the grid, P2, alongside the Estre Grello Manthey Porsche. It didn't appear, we noticed that, didn't it? Obviously it didn't appear on the circuit. I didn't speak, because you'll tell me off of this, but we messaged last night, Mr. Hittard and I. Very much late.
Did he reply?
Of course he did.
Well, he didn't. You messaged him several times yesterday.
He did actually. He did reply.
Okay.
Basically saying what they'd done was in qualifying yesterday. This is the 34 car that's just set off on this group at the very back of it, the Valkenhorst Aston Martin. That they had an overboost in qualifying, which therefore had them disqualified from that qualifying position, which is why the Audi moved up, as you say, moved up one space, and correctly the whole grid reordered, and it's just gone off again. When I say again, he's already had, I don't know whether Pittard's at the wheel of that, but he's had an off this morning.
It's Christian Krocknes, by the way.
Okay, well, in which case the car's tricky then, because David Pittard had an off in qualifying this morning at Horijken. Not enough to damage it, but it's had an off and an incident. So not the smoothest flowing weekend that would like to come.
That's not Krognes, that's
30.
Henry Valkenhorst in the 30 car. They're very similarly liveried. And Henry Valkenhorst, yes, a moment. Again, tyre selection will be tough in this because I don't think it's as wet as it was at certain points yesterday. And the nature of this track, because it snakes around such a very, very large footprint, it's going to be, you know, incredibly damp in places, but there might even be a dry line emerging in others, depending on whether it's still raining all the way around the racetrack. So do you go inters or do you go with fully wet weather tyres? Christian Krognes has got to the end of the Grand Prix lap and actually dived into the pit lane. That was a full run off into the gravel for Henry Valkenhorst.
It's gone straight on, hasn't it? Almost reminiscent of a couple of the Porsches yesterday, wasn't it? Just outbrake themselves. But
Krognes doesn't go on to Hatzenbach. He's instead gone in the pit. So clearly all is not right with car 34, not the car we're focusing on at the moment, which is the sister Valkenhorst Vantage. And there is evidence of it. So Krognes having to... Oh, is that a bonnet that's starting to flap
the bonnet
up?
Down. Yes, over the cat. They've got quick release catches, 2 on the front, 2 on the rear of those cars, and they're literally taping those down and taping that to the wing.
And the other thing is, of course, on a wet surface, wet bodywork, does the tape actually adhere? So they're trying now to dry it all out so that that big old gaffer tape, which has got stitching within it, is going to do a good enough job. Taping it right down the seam now as well. But clearly Christian Krognes did not want to head out onto Hatzenbach and have that as a major distraction, because it's his side of the car as well. So if the rear lip of the bonnet is starting to lift, that's going to massively restrict his visibility.
It's a great lift, and it comes up and you can't see a thing. Not ideal for
not ideal.
Look at apexes and things, turning points now.
So now
bad enough around here without having a bonnet in the way.
The issue is he can't get out of the pit lane now, because presumably that light is red and it's turned to green, or at least been extinguished. So away he will go, and this now becomes his new formation lap. So they get a formation lap because they're being sent off from a standstill, and obviously you want to be buzzing past the pit lane at top speed in order for it to be a quick lap. So this is a chance to assess the conditions and at the same time heat up the brakes, heat up the tyres, and then push for a quick lap. Bear in mind, the top qualifying format for next month no longer is 2 separate sessions, where it used to be everybody went in, unless you were already pre-qualified, everybody was put into top qualifying 1, and then if you finished in the top 10 places, let's say, you then progressed into top qualifying 2. Well, it's a single session now, and therefore makes the whole process, I suppose, a little shorter, but all that more important as well. It's not like you've got 2 opportunities with 2 sets of tyres any longer, as Julian Andlauer, he says, just checking that car 33 is driven by the Frenchman. I beg your pardon, it's Alessio Picariello. Well, Picariello wasn't able to do any driving in the race yesterday because of the crash for Andlauer. That happened prior to any driver change in Falcon Motorsports number 33. So maybe the decision has been made overnight to put the Belgian in. And this guy, for me, I was about to call him a kid, but it's been a few years since he's been that, in fairness. I do remember him emerging from his campaign in Asia, despite being from Western Europe, made a name for himself in Japan and other parts of that continent, and then came home, if you like, and really started to draw attention for the key runners within Porsche. He came through Porsche 1 make racing, and let's see what the 33 car can do. That's the same chassis that was crashed yesterday. In actual fact, I think they mainly did most of the repair work, but there was a safety issue that prevented them from rejoining. It was just labelled as because of a safety issue. We're not going to do any racing today. That will have been massively looked at overnight, and now the car able to qualify again. As the 16, which was the first one waved off, this was the race winner from yesterday, and Patrick Niederhauser will now begin a flying lap. He's very much on his own, as everybody is in this session. No car in front or behind. It's a joyous time for any racer to have the whole of the Nordschleife to themselves.
It's a joyous time for any driver to have any track to themselves. It's peace and quiet, and nobody else to worry about it or interfere or spoil the game, spoil the party. But add into the fact that then the Nordschleife even better, Just a bit of a shame that it's on tricky conditions, and it's that thing I described yesterday. It's that greasy element again, that neither one thing nor the other. And you're forever on tippy toes, and there's almost a little bit of dry line on there. I suspect they're probably on intermediates for this.
Well, Christodoulou, which was due to be the next car through, the Mercedes from GetSpeed, he said, I'm on the wrong tyre, and has come in the pit lane. So he's not going to begin, and he's effectively foregoing this fast lap now, because he's done his rolling lap. This should be a quick one, and he's therefore only going to get one opportunity to do it, but on a different set of tyres. So was he on wet? And they thought he has considered.
Well, I was going to say, what's he on and which way is he going?
Well, that's
the key information we need, isn't it?
I don't think it's wet enough for full wets. Not all the way around the track, and maybe he just thinks that in the drier bits I stand to gain far more than I would lose.
It can't be ready for slicks.
No.
Not all the way round, I'd have thought. Maybe the GP circuit, you could get away with it, but I don't think so on the whole Nordschleife as well. I'd have thought it's an intermediate tyre at the moment, and possibly, as you say, they've started on a wet there and started to come down a level, because those wets will only. As soon as the lead car there, Patrick Niederhauser in the Shearer Sport car turns left at Sabine Schmidt's curve and goes on to the Nordschleife, that bit there is already wet. Yeah. Then it goes back to being a bit drier again. There's a bit of spray coming out of the back of that car going down through Hatzenbach, which suggests it's not a slick yet, and it's huge risk. But yeah, as you start to get to Hatzenbach now, there's quite a bit of spray. So it's definitely not a slick tyre yet, and there's even bits of standing waters. We see different views from different camera angles looking down Hatzenbach now. There's admittedly offline.
GetSpeed clearly went in the same direction with their other car, because now Fabian Schiller's pitted in car 14 to do a tyre switch. Also, the only Ferrari in the session, which is Thomas Neubauer in his realised Kondo Racing with Rinaldi 296, is in car 45. And Marco Holzer brings the Hankook competition Porsche into pit lane number 55. So there are some that have stayed out for their first flying lap, including the number 8 Audi of Frank Stippler. This is the Lithuanian-flagged Jutta Racing squad. And also staying out, Alessio Picariello, Danny Junkerdea. Well, we're still waiting for him, actually, to appear at the end of the Dottinger Hoor. So more news on the Spaniard very, very shortly. Cars heading around at the moment. Patrick Niederhauser in Porsche 16. Picariello in Porsche number 33. And the Audi from Jutta Racing for Frank Stippler, that's car number 8. And if you're maybe around the circuit listening to us here on RS1 for Sunday, we were on RS3 elsewhere on the network yesterday, but because Misano, the 12 hours of Misano is now complete, we've moved over to the main channel. That's almost like a promotion, I would suggest. And hopefully you've found our coverage in sound and hopefully in vision as well. And if you're somewhere around the Nordschleife, you might be wondering where on earth those GetSpeed Mercedes have gone to. Well, both pitted at the end of their rolling laps for a tyre change. And
confirmation that those cars are changing to intermediate, so we were right. They had gone out on wets, and it's not wet enough to warrant that tyre. And that's quite a brave choice in a shootout, because you say it's a limited time. We haven't got a 90-minute session where you go, oh, okay, because it's 10 minutes for a lap effectively in the wet, let's say, all damp. Plus you stop and speed up time. So that's quite brave to do that on a shootout, but it must be worth it. Yeah. Because that wet must be absolutely horrible then.
You can't come back with the excuse to say, well, I was about to start a flying lap, but actually we decided to pit, so I'll start my flying lap next time around. This is their flying lap. They've done their rolling lap like everybody else did, and then you only get 2 flyers. So they've effectively ripped one of them up for the benefit of a tyre change. Clearly, Shearer Sport PHX have selected, well, at the very least, intermediates. I can't believe that Patrick Niederhauser is extracting this amount of speed on a slick tyre, because it's too damp on the Grand Prix track, and some different lines being taken by Picariello to stay away from the standing water. Plenty of curb, though, I noticed, coming out of that sequence down the hill. So that was Verseifen, and on the approach to Exmuller. And now he plummets down to the lowest part of the circuit at Breitscheid. And that frustratingly slow in places climb back up again, which includes Bergwerk. But then once you've gone through the really slow right-hander at Bergwerk, you then start to pick up the speed. And that's the place where bravery is rewarded. at Kesselchen and Klostertal. So Patrick Niederhauser, generally the quickest car so far, although an absolute best from Danny Juncadella in his Red Bull team-apt Lamborghini Huracan. He's gone quicker than the Porsche of Niederhauser in Sector 3 and Sector 4. So different cars are going to be faster in different places. That's the joy of SP9 racing.
We saw that evidence quite a bit yesterday, didn't we, with the Porsche versus Mercedes dynamics. Obviously rear engine, front engine. But the Porsche having a great front end, but as it came out of corners, getting on the power, having a nice little bit of swirling, a little bit of drifting, which is great for us to watch. It's not the most efficient way to have a lap time, but absolutely great to watch from a spectator commentary point of view. And the Mercedes having the opposite problem of just understeer, unable to turn in at corners and just running on and just going slow, slow, slow. And you can see them. You know, we saw, I think, with Lucas Stoltz and Fabian Schiller struggling with that get speed of, like, you know, can I drive this tank, this bus any slower to get the thing to turn in, is what they're thinking. Of course, it's still a very fine fettled GT3 racing car, but to them, it's not working the way they want it to, as in, can we just get rid of this water and have it dry, please? I know what it does in the dry.
Christian Krognes, having made that stop at the end of, at the end of, it was partway around his rolling lap, wasn't it? He did the Grand Prix lap, then he dived into the pit lane, so should be legitimately able to begin his rolling lap again, because he didn't go on to Hatzenbach. So that's the real car that's really out of sequence. Krognes heading into Tiergarten now to begin his flying lap. So this is not a timed one for car 34, but they needed to take down that bonnet, and now he will head across the line. We're not going to get a legitimate time as such, therefore, from the Krognes machine. And that lap, actually, with the pit stop involved, took him over 11 minutes. But now he begins his first flyer. Meanwhile, Niederhauser is within Sector 7. Remember, in this format, where we don't use the Mercedes arena and the Grand Prix track goes all the way down to, well, the Grand Prix track always goes down to the hairpin at the bottom of the hill, but in NLS races, we don't use that part of the racetrack. Instead, we would turn right exactly at the point where Krognes is now and use the cut through. So it's the longest version of the Grand Prix track and the full Nordschleife, which is the traditional N24 layout of this circuit. In the background, you can hear Alessio Picariello's Porsche hard at work as he is heading out of Flansgarten now into the Stefan Beloff S. And a twitch again as he approaches Schwabenschwanz. Yeah, just a bit of snap oversteer we were talking about there for that Porsche, wasn't it? Catching it. All work on board. Yes, so again. Much work. I mean, and bear in mind, Picariello didn't do any driving yesterday, so he's having to work all of this out for himself on Sunday morning, as it is just about.
The Shearer Porsche there staying hard right down the Dottingher up to Tiergarten, picking up where there's a wetter line and taking a totally different line through the kink there, coming up to Tiergarten, and now coming off, I'd say, basic line through there, but almost like trying to keep those tyres cool already.
So Patrick Niederhauser in the 16 Scherer Sport PHX Porsche, winning in the full darkness last night as he brought that car over the line, and as he did so in winning yesterday's race, setting the fastest lap of the race, because as the track was drying, of course, the speeds were increasing, the lap times were coming down, and that's a good effort. 9:13.242, not quite as quick as Kevin Estel was in the absent Grello Porsche in this session. And if you're joining us late, you might be wondering where on earth is the yellow and green Porsche that topped normal qualifying this morning. That's a session that ran from 8:15 to 9:45. Well, they didn't get out of the pit lane in time because of a tyre carrier issue. I wonder whether that's a tyre trolley that has somehow...
I was thinking, but I don't know how that... But they're actually working on the left rear of the car, apparently. So that is a car issue as well. So
okay.
There's additional information which we need to process correctly to report for you.
Yeah. I wonder whether a tyre trolley had somehow collapsed under the weight of the tyres that it's been carrying all weekend, and they didn't have a spare. Anyway, they didn't get out of the pit lane within the required time, and therefore you cannot take your place on the start line for the beginning of top qualifying. So we went without the fastest car from this morning, and they were significantly faster than everybody else. I mean, 8.5 seconds clear, Kevin Estre, from the 16 Scherer Sport Porsche. Over the line will go the Jutta Racing Frank Stippler-driven Audi. And in the meantime, by the way, Alessio Picariello's crossed the line as well, but he was 7.5 seconds slower than Patrick Niederhauser. So what kind of tyres is Picariello on? Is he therefore on wet weather tyres? And they're just not working to the extent that Niederhauser's tyres are. Stippler was slower than that, 6 seconds slower than Picariello, and a full 13.5 seconds behind Niederhauser's effort.
I wonder if the Scherer car was actually running hand-cut slicks.
Well, it's possible.
Hence having to keep offline, keep it in the wet bits to keep that tyre cool.
Yeah, because there's nothing in the regulations to say well, the tyre technicians can't take a little bit out of a slick tyre and almost create a less of an intermediate, a sort of inter-intermediate, if you like, that bridging that gap between the standard inter and the entirely slick tyre. There did seem to be quite a lot of water being cleared by the 16 Porsche, though. That was evident from the spray that it was generating, so it was very efficient on the wet road surface. And Niederhauser, I was going to say streets ahead of everybody else, but now Danny Juncker-Deo's just crossed the line in his dark blue Red Bull Lamborghini Huracan and has come within a second of Niederhauser's effort. So it's 1.029, the gap between Niederhauser and Juncker-Deo, who sets a 9.14.2. Also 9.14.2 from Nico Menzel's 44 Porsche. You can hear his engine working hard in the background, and again, nowhere near the apex as he goes downhill, deliberately so, by the way, on towards the hairpin at the bottom of the hill. So still some karting type lines being used. I was just going to say it's a karting line there from Nico Menzel in the 44 Falcon Porsche, going in very deep to the left-hand side of a tight right-hander to get the car slowed down more in a straight line, get the weight over to the front wheels, and then turn it at more of an angle, more obliquely, to get it through the corner, because otherwise it's speed. So basically scrubbing speed off to turn the thing rather than going in at the speed he would normally, which is it's just counterintuitive. But we're just a little bit of onboard there with Nico Menzel in that Falcon car. And it's that proverbial swan we mentioned yesterday, that the amount of work going on the wheel from the outside of the two pictures together makes it just look like it's just turning right. You saw what's going on inside, and they've got hours of this to come. It begs the question this morning with this qualifying session this morning, that really, why did any or many of the SB9 cars go out at all this morning and have incidents like the Vulcan Horse 34 car when they've got this qualifying session to almost like stand alone for this afternoon? I don't think you're automatically into it. I think you have to get into top qualifying by the normal standard qualifying session. If you don't take part in the first, you can't get into the second.
Well, I was thinking, because sure, that's exactly my point, that there must be a rule for that.
But, I mean, it's a bit like in Formula 1. Why don't we just all go into Q3?
Yeah, I'm getting.
But you can't get to Q3 unless you've run in Q1 and Q2. Is my understanding.
Because otherwise you could just sit it out and not. Why risk it? Exactly. So.
And also, I mean, you get Kevin Estre should have benefited from being the fastest car by being the first car out there, you know, and no car in front, no distraction. You could argue you're almost doing a bit of track sweeping, mind you, because the rain will have settled and you're the first one to appear on the scene with the track at its wettest. And maybe you would want to be 5th or 6th given the choice, because some of that water clearance has already happened. But regarding next month's race, there will be some, and by the way, there is a list that exists somewhere, but it has not been made public. That's why we're not talking about it. But Walter Hornung and his team are well aware of who is likely to already be into proper top qualifying. That's for next month's race. So there are 1 or 2 slots that have already been, or may well be awarded by the end of this weekend. And then you've got to fill the others via the standard qualifying session.
Yeah.
So you run normal qualifying, and then the quickest ones in those get to go through into a single standalone top qualifying session, which is a Friday before the big race.
Which brings us back to the point I keep reiterating of this being qualifiers this weekend. It's as much, if anything, mostly for the organisers to see how it runs, see how Bob, Brown's performance, peters out on the cars, etc. And whilst they don't release anything this weekend, as you quite rightly said, they don't keep it right till the 24-hour, it is probably about a week, 10 days before, I think, in form normally that they release that information. But for this weekend, it is absolutely, you know, it's like voting in a sealed ballot box. It's all kept, it's there, it's whatever, it's our information you do not need to know. Whilst they go and assess it all, ready for the 24 hours. So this is hugely contributing to the 24-hour race for the organisers as much as anything else. Then when they've made their decisions, they then make a public announcement, and then the teams get to hear. Then everybody starts tearing their hair out. So those that aren't happy, those that are happy, they keep quiet because like, well, we're great. We needed that. We needed that car lowered or restricted bigger or whatever it was, or a bit of power gain. So it's all to come out. So basically, watch this space in about 10 days' time.
Yeah. Well, I must pass on my thanks to Thomas Kroner of Vega Timing, who has been ferreting around to try and find this document, but he says it's just not available. But also to our sometime colleague, Lucas Gajewski, who I know is busy on MotoGP duty this weekend from Silverstone. It's quite weird when you've got a German commentator commentating on an English race, and us English commentators are dealing with the Nürburgring, but sometimes these things do switch like that.
It's a modern world.
And although Lucas, therefore, is not with us at the Nürburgring, he does have friends there, and one has actually approached Walter Hornung to say, where's this list then for the top qualifiers? And Walter confirming there's no list for N24 top qualifying at this point. He said that that's potentially because of the different entry percentages between pro cars, pro-am cars and am cars. And depending on the mix of those driver combinations, you could still lose your spot in top qualifying. Until the entry list is finalised, that is when the list eventually comes out. So that's the reason we're not talking about it, because nobody knows. It's top secret at this stage. Patrick Niederhauser, by the way, is on to a second top qualifying lap. He hasn't yet come through. Niederhauser is faster by a second than Danny Juncadella. And the difference between Juncadella's Huracan and then Nico Menzel's Falcon Motorsports Porsche, I didn't mention this, it's 15 thousandths of a second in these ever-changing conditions. But we got a 914.27 from the Lambo, a 914.28 from the two-tone blue Falcon Motorsports Porsche number 44. As for the second time, Patrick Niederhauser is on the Dottinger Hohe. So these short, sharp sectors to complete the lap. One is about 21 seconds, the other is about 33 seconds. And in a very short period of time, we'll find out whether he's quicker. But to be honest, I'm not seeing any green sector times from the number 16 Porsche. So I reckon the 913.2 as his first effort will still be the quickest. And as the Porsches pile their way into Tiergarten, I'm just constantly thinking about Julian Andlauer's mistake from yesterday, but it's nowhere near as wet as it was in that the early phase of yesterday evening's race. Niederhauser will cross the line, and it's a 913.9, so he's about 7/10 of a second away from his previous best, and that will be it for car 16.
As indeed it is for number 55, the Hankook competition car that's a Porsche with Marco Holzer in the pits. That car came in and changed 2 cut slicks. We've had it confirmed, but pulled it into the pits, retired it, which means it ends their qualifying. They're out effectively, so they get no further running of this, and they are dead last of the 16 cars out there now. So maybe that points to it being too wet still for those hand cut slicks. So it's still kind of like a intermediate at the moment, it would appear.
The yellows are out at Callenhard, so that suggests somebody has had a moment in that part of the racetrack, and it is in fact a slow zone at Marshall Post 107 and 108. So
yeah, no indication of a car there at the moment. Oh yes, it is, it's 50.
Car 50 is Arno Klassen in his Equipe Vitesse Audi R8. That is the AM entry for car number 50, which qualified earlier today. Where exactly? I'm just working my way through, because that's an AM car and therefore a fully AM lineup. It was a little bit further down. There were some, of course, that didn't qualify at all. It's not amongst that list. I'll look for that in a second. But yes, Arno Klassen or anybody else behind that car might be in strife. And of course, where did the delayed Christian Krognes's Aston Martin end up? It might have been behind that Audi, and therefore any chance for that car to improve its time might be gone. Let's have a look at Danny Juncadea's time. We're still waiting for the Spaniard to come across the line as Adam Christodoulou will complete his one and only lap, because remember, at the start of his first flying lap, GetSpeed decided to pit both of their Mercedes for a tyre change. So they gave up the opportunity to do 2 fast laps around here as the 44's almost in the fence coming out of Tiergarten. There was a big squirm for Nico Menzel's Porsche from one side of the racetrack to the other. He did just about arrest that slide, and the 44 Nico Menzel car, does it improve? 9:14.8, no it doesn't, 9:14.2 was the best time, despite going quicker through that long sector 7 for Nico Menzel. Danny Juncadea has crossed the line, but he didn't get any more time out of his lap time either, so 6/10 or 5/10 of a second slower. Now about to cross the line is the 48 Loesch Porsche of Gabriele Piana.
Just to finish off on your point on the number 50, a Keep Vitesse Audi R8, that qualified, that's the number 50 car by the way, that qualified 34th this morning.
That was a great lap from Gabriele Piana. He suddenly really goes up the field to 4th position, and he was languishing in mid-pack before that final tour. So a 9:14.7, as maybe the track was starting to dry out in the crucial places, and he gets within 1.4 seconds of Patrick Niederhauser's effort. So Niederhauser remaining fastest. Remember, he did that time on his first of 2 flyers, a 9:13.2. And he's a second clear of Danny Juncadea, who's just completed his second flying lap, but Danny did not improve, so 9:14.2 is his time, and therefore there is a full second between the two. Still the 15 thousandths of a second separate Juncadea from Nico Menzel in the Falken Motorsport Porsche number 44, but the big improver for the second lot of flying laps was Gabriele Piana's Black Falcon Team EAE Porsche. So that puts 3 911 GT3Rs into the top 4 places. What about Fabian Schiller? Well, this is going to be an improvement because it's his one and only flying lap. Remember both. Oh, and he goes top. Fabian Schiller is quickest of anybody by 0.3 of a second. So all of a sudden, Porsche's plan to lock out the 3 of the 4 places is totally ruined by a very late tyre choice. They scrapped their first flying lap, but they've gone all guns blazing in the second and potentially bag pole for NLS 5.
You reap that which you sow. They knew what they were doing. They knew their car. I was just watching that coming up through down Dottingerhoe, that bit we said, hanging over to the right-hand side, keeping those tyres wet. But what was interesting was when it drops off the Dottingerhoe down the dip to rise up into the Tiergarten section there, where it's very, very close to those bits there where Julian Andau went off yesterday, almost by the barrier there. It looked as greasy as anything up there for that Mercedes, and it almost looked like Fabian Schiller was tippy-toeing that Mercedes through there, but he obviously knew exactly, it was fingertips at the wheel, he knew exactly how that car felt underneath, and it looked pedestrian, but he knew exactly what he was doing, and it's reaped the benefit and gone provisional pole.
Now the question remains about Christian Krognes, because he is on to, well, he's showing that he's completed 2 laps, but obviously that one pit stop. Is this the second flying lap for Christian Krognes? To be honest, it may be academic anyway, because I can't see the Aston Martin improving enough to snatch pole position away from the Mercedes. I'm looking at any other possibility for cars that are onto their second and final flying lap for a chance to get anywhere close to a 9.9, but it appears that that is not going to be possible.
Interesting, I was watching Fabian Schiller, who's completed that lap in the number 14 GetSpeed Mercedes, taken provisional pole by 0.3 of a second, as we've just said. But even on his slowing down lap, he's clearly not having another run. He's still on the GP circuit, still using quite a lot of the curb, even at slow speed, pottering over curbs. And I'm quite surprised at that. Is it why risk it? But I guess DNA of a driver for you, if you like. Just can't. Old habits die hard.
Henry Valkenhorst on the Dottingerhoe, heading into Antonius Bucher. Remember, as he was doing his exploratory lap, the rolling lap, the Henry Valkenhorst Aston Martin fell off the road and briefly into the gravel, and he's now north of 10 minutes on this particular lap. Christian Krognes will be permitted to finish this lap, but remember that he's basically a rolling lap behind it, or rather a flying lap behind everybody else, and I don't think he'll get the opportunity to complete the second one unless... No, it is showing 2 laps completed, so maybe he did do a first. Yeah, 9:31.0, so that was his first flying lap, and he will get the second one in, even though there was an extra probably 90 seconds, maybe 2 minutes, staying in the pit lane as he ducked into pit road via the back door to sort out that bonnet. Maybe a clip failing, which meant that the rear-facing edge of the bonnet was actually rising a little bit as the airflow went through the car and just disrupting his vision.
The Keep Vitesse Audi into the pits, that's aborted that.
Well, that's the car that was off, wasn't it?
Exactly.
Causing the yellow flag at Callenhard. Yeah. Here's Christian Krognes down the Dottinger Hoor, looking a little more gloomy above this part of the racetrack. We were talking yesterday about the forecast for Sunday and the chance of rain. It was as high as 85%, I seem to recall. Well,
still is, yeah.
Yeah, that doesn't necessarily tell us how heavily it's going to rain, just that it will rain, and it's very likely that it will rain. Way off the curb at Tiergarten, getting nowhere near the painted line, Christian Krognes. Had little choice but to clip the blend line, which delineates the pit road entry, but that didn't disrupt the car too much, and Christian Krognes will go across the line with a 9:27.6, which is better than his first effort, but still only good enough for 10th position. So it was Fabian Schiller who had a wry smile at the end of yesterday's race when he finished in 3rd position with his teammates in car number 14, Maxime Martin and Lucas Stoltz. I think probably Schiller thought there was a bit more to give from that Mercedes. They just needed to be careful how they extracted the pace. Well, they have certainly done that in this top qualifying session, but it was after a slight misstep in identifying which tyres they should have been on. Went out on wets, we think, and after the rolling lap, they decided to pit both Get Speed Mercedes AMGs to switch them to Inters, and for the 14 car, it was absolutely the right decision.
You're saying about the weather there. Just have a quick look at the precipitation overnight. We had 3.8 millimetres of rain overnight, would you believe, which is now receding. It is down to, you mentioned the 85% that I'd informed you of yesterday. It's now down to 75% and actually going to be nearer 60% for the start of the race, with 0.4 millimetre due in 3 hours between 8 and 11 o'clock. Our race starts at a little bit after that. So, but the bit is, it's going to go back up to 80% and increase and double that in the second part of the race.
That'll be
basically, it looks like another wet one, basically, in summary.
It's definitely going to be wet. It's just where will it be wet? How wet? How long will it be wet? Is it going to rain non-stop from start to finish? I think that's unlikely because it's a 4-hour race. So changeable conditions, and you know, as the cloud tracks across, wind direction is so crucial because you'll work out where the rain is likely to hit first and then where it is going to reach. And Fabian Schiller is going to be interviewed by our German colleagues in pit lane. Much happier, you get the sense, than at the end of yesterday's race, where the Mercedes did eventually finish 3rd, but it was quite a way down from the winning car. So they will have been scratching their heads to a certain extent yesterday to try and work out how to get a bit more speed and a bit more readily at the start of the race from yesterday's event. Because, I mean, if that car can produce that sort of lap time consistently, why can't they win that and break the stranglehold that Porsche have had for all of the season? I mean, we've had 4 NLS races, and each and every time a Porsche has been on the top step of the podium, very often accompanied by more Porsches elsewhere on the podium. And as we said, Mercedes will not like that, BMW and Audi will not like that, Aston Martin and Ferrari will not like that ahead of the major race next month, and they'll either want an adjustment in balance of performance, and if you've got 5 other manufacturers all protesting for that, then Porsche might be in a difficult position. But also, it is on the other teams to try and bridge the gap, and maybe Mercedes can do that later today. They look the most likely, don't they? If Porsche aren't going to win this afternoon, it's surely Mercedes that are the closest, having finished 3rd yesterday.
Yeah, but you can never discount an Audi in there. Certainly one driven by Frank Stippler. At some point, you just can't. We saw that yesterday where he was, not in position coming down the Dottinghauer, and all of a sudden he wasn't only in position, he'd take the position and around the outside. Anybody that knows all these guys know the Nürburgring extremely well. Stippler just seems to be operating on a slightly different level at the moment. No disrespect to anybody else, but he just seems to be in almost like that Porsche sweet spot. But he's not in a Porsche at the moment. He's in an Audi again, which he's of course quite synonymous with. Is there a time for a change? We've had, as you said, four races of the season so far. 3 different teams all running the same product, Porsche. Is it time for a change? I don't know. Mercedes, I've got to say, it is looking good, but Porsche seem to have that race pace. We saw the qualifying yesterday, didn't I? I ran through it when we had the top 10 in qualifying yesterday, and it was Porsche, Aston, Audi, Mercedes, Ferrari. It was the top 5. 5 different makes in the top 5, and yet it still became, as the race evolved, it became Porsche, Porsche, Mercedes, Porsche, Porsche, Porsche. They just seem to literally, the cream rises to the top, the Porsches rise to the top of the field.
So Fabian Schiller in top qualifying, quickest with his effort, 9:12.919, and that puts him 0.3 of a second faster than Patrick Niederhauser's number 16 Porsche from Scherer Sport PHX. So it's Get Speed quickest, Scherer Sport second. Danny Juncadella will be on the inside of the second row for today's race in his Lamborghini Huracan, which is a much better starting position than yesterday. 9:14.2 for the Spaniard. Nico Menzel's 44 Porsche from Falcon Motorsports, 9:14.2 to be fourth, ahead of Gabriele Piana for Black Falcon, also in a Porsche, number 48. Mercedes have added Christodoulou, number 17, the AMG, the other Get Speed car, which did the switch of tyres, ahead of Alessio Picariello's Falcon Motorsport Porsche, number 33. The 84 Max Hoffer-driven Easterland Racing Audi. Jutta Racing's Audi for Frank Stippler that started really well that session, but only good enough for 9th in car number 8. Christian Krognes, despite that difficulty at the start of the session to take down the bonnet, 34 finished 10th fastest in the Aston Martin, ahead of Nico Bastian's dynamic. No, that's not Nico Bastian. I made that mistake yesterday. Bastian Bous's Dynamic GT Porsche on the Pirelli tyre, car number 54. Then Thomas Neubauer's Realize Kondo Racing Ferrari 296, number 45, ahead of Arno Klassen's Audi, number 50, Henry Valkenhorst's Aston Martin, number 30, Christian Buchart's Valkenhorst Aston Martin, number 35, was 15th. Marco Holzer in the Hankook competition Porsche was 16th, and just number 55. And remember that the car that probably would have been duking it out for pole position for today's race, the 911 Grello Porsche, didn't get out of the pit lane in time. So therefore, Kevin Estre or Patrick Pilet could not take active part at all in top qualifying. And that's a lesson to be learned, if nothing else, prior to proper top qualifying next month, ahead of the latest edition of the Nürburgring 24 Hours. The Nürburg Castle, I can't even see the top of that. Actually, that's having quite a lot of work done on it with scaffolding towers left and right. But the cloud is that low that actually the very top of the tower is obscured by cloud. Modern day work on a truly historic feature of the Nordschleife, but that's to make sure that it lasts at least another 100 years, I guess, and important to get those problems before they become major issues and chunks of the building start to fall away entirely. So that will no doubt extend into the Nürburgring 24-hour weekend as well, that repair work. Brave old souls that were here at the racetrack to witness top qualifying. Again, a dress rehearsal for the new format of top qualifying, the single session top qualifying for the 24 hours of the Nürburgring in a few weeks' time. And the grid is now properly set for the second qualifier race of the weekend, the ADAC 24-hour Nürburgring Qualifier, which also dovetails or is exactly the same as NLS 5, only not by title, but does carry the same championship points. And the problem for the 911 is, yeah, okay, they didn't take part in top qualifying. That's maybe on the face of it, no big issue. But therefore, they have to start 17th in start Group 1. And that makes the opening lap an awful lot more difficult than Kevin Estre's first lap yesterday, where he had a clear road in front of him. He's now going to have 16 cars in front of him on a wet track and lots of spray.
Yes, well, not their day today, is it, for Kevin Estre? So car didn't even appear in top qualifying. So we will be returning fairly short, well, it's about an hour's time for that race, won't we?
We will, yes. So we are back on air in an hour and 10 minutes, in actual fact.
It's the biggest race of the year.
For the build-up at 1 o'clock. So we will see you for that. Bye for now.
Where excitement meets courage and adrenaline meets passion. Every ounce of dedication focused on this one event. A week of festival frenzy for thousands of spectators. A week narrowing down towards the toughest challenge for hundreds of competitors. Driven by the pursuit of one ultimate goal. To accomplish what only the chosen few have ever achieved. So, it all comes down to this.
Es geht los! Es geht rein in die grüne Hölle! 24 Stunden Motorsport!
And it's so much more than just a race. With lots to explore. Darkness falls. The campsites ignite the party spirit of the motorsport enthusiasts. By sunrise, the fate of the race hangs in the balance. These are the ADAC 24 hours of the Nürburgring.